Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show, everybody. We got a good one for you. This one's going to be a little bit of a heavy hitter, so you want to tune in. I'm going to ask those who may have children nearby. This is going to be a very adult conversation about some very serious issues. My name is Amanda Lockhart Davis, and I am your host of Life Uncensored, navigating adulthood one episode at a time. So, let's see who's riding shotgun today. We're going to be welcoming to the stage Katrina Massey. She is the newest member to the Life Uncensored family. Katrina Massey's journey began with being exploited in the commercial sex industry as a teenager in Atlanta and New York. She has since transformed her life, becoming a real estate broker, a restaurateur, and business owner of several ventures managing over $6 million annually. Drawing from her experiences, she inspires professionals and youth affected by sex trafficking to find balance, inspiration, and progression beyond trauma. For nearly 20 years, her expertise has driven changes in laws at both local and national levels. Being of service is her passion, and in all she does, she leads with compassion. I want you all to give a nice warm welcome to this new family member of ours, Miss Katrina Massey. Hey,
Hel-
Katrina.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Great. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for being so willing to talk about this very sensitive but very
hmm
relevant and serious topic. Um, I know it's right before Thanksgiving, and a lot of times people want to talk about all the fun, happy things, but I didn't want to wait another moment to get this message out there. So I'm so
hmm
glad that you've joined us, and just thank you already. I already know this is going to be a great conversation, so I'm thanking you in advance.
Thank you so much for having me. A great conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
hmm
We are going to just jump right into it. Okay.
All right.
Um, let's just talk about your journey. Let's go back to where it all started. So, if you would, will you share a little bit about your early life and the circumstances that led to your experience of being sex trafficked?
Absolutely. By definition, sex trafficking is a form of modern day slavery. I don't exactly agree with that term, but
Hmm.
this is what we have by definition, in which individuals perform commercial sexual acts through force, fraud, or coercion.
Mm.
And those traffickers look very different in different circumstances. And in my particular circumstance, he was what they call a Romeo pimp. And Romeo pimps tend to, they appear as the boyfriend, they appear as the business partner, and they show up in a way where it starts with love or what is perceived to be love. And then it's something absolutely different than what
Mm.
you thought you were signing up for, and that was the case for me. And, everyone's vulnerabilities, circumstances, again, not cookie cutter, very, very different.
Okay.
And even just reflecting on my life as a teenager, I grew up in a two-family home or two-parent home until about I was about to give the year because I'm like, nobody knows how far long ago that was. It sounds so far away. But until I was in 13,
Okay.
and my parents divorced, and life changed drastically.
Mm.
And, my father had always been present. I'm so grateful for him to be in my life. And, but he's an old school Southerner. I'm from Atlanta. And he's that type of Southerner where it's like, I provide a roof over your head, you got food on the table, you have clothes in your closet, and that's how I express love.
Oh, okay.
So love for me did not show up as affection. It didn't show up as hugs. It didn't show up as kisses. It didn't show up as affirmation. And when that's absent, oftentimes, like our souls long for that.
Mm.
And I I sought that outside of myself. I sought that outside of my family. And my trafficker saw that vulnerability. He saw it.
Let me ask you, I want to
Mm-hmm.
pause right there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
At which point in this entire journey did you realize that about yourself, that that was something you were starved for? I can't imagine that at that young age you knew it, but
No
like at
clue.
which point did you realize it?
um, through therapy.
Okay.
Yes,
Much later.
and much, much later in
Okay.
life,
Okay.
because it
Mm,
not only, I always tell people, there's life after the life, there's life after the trauma. And, regardless of who did what to you, we have to be mindful of the energetic invitations.
hmm,
And we have to think about what got us here. And that doesn't mean it's your fault, but you have to recognize like what got us here, because even after that experience, I also had to reflect on the type of people I was choosing after that, you know
mm,
and what was I seeking, and what void was being filled. And coming to some of those conclusions, I started to realize a pattern. And it took time, and even realizing that pattern through my first divorce, just really just starting to pick up on areas in my life where I'm the common denominator,
okay.
you
Okay.
know?
And that's a hard pill to swallow in any faction.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, I was working in a restaurant as a teenager. I was a host at a restaurant, and he started to come in, and he was a regular. And it's your job as a host to get to know who shows up, who walks in the door. If you start seeing some of the same faces over and over again, you should know them by name. And you wouldn't be a good host if you didn't.
Hmm.
And in doing my job, we got to know one another, and then that turned into hanging out after work. Keep in mind, I'm still in high school, and this is a very, very grown man who did not present himself as such. And next thing, I'm in love. I'm in love, and it's like I can never identify like when the pivot happened. And even thinking back, I still can't really say that's when it happened, or that's when things changed. You're young, you're in love, you don't have a clue of
Mm-mm.
what's going on.
Mm-mm.
And before I knew it, there was no turning back. Before I knew it, the physical abuse started, the verbal abuse started, and there were no options, there were no choice. And then came the threats on my life. And keep in mind, I'm a teenager. I'm telling this man all my business, so he knows where all my family lives. You know, so it was a compound of just psychological um, violence.
Mm.
You know, and he moved me from Atlanta to New York to again further isolate me. And from there, it was just a journey of getting back to myself and figuring out how to get back to myself.
Sure. When can you give the audience a little bit, if you're comfortable, a little bit
Hmm.
more detail in terms of the actual age? When you say I was a teenager, were we 18 or were we 14?
17, 17,
17. So
mhm,
at what age did he move you to New York?
18.
18. So when
Mhm.
you were at the age where nobody couldn't tell you anything by law, even if they
And
wanted to.
yeah, that was part of it. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
Hmm.
So what would you say were some of those? I can't even imagine. There's got to be so many. Like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced during all of this?
Figuring out how to get away was the biggest challenge.
I can't imagine.
Is figuring out how to get to safety and stay safe.
Mm,
Every night it was a question of safety, because your trafficker is not like standing next to you or looking over your shoulder when you have to make contact with that buyer, you know, and a mass like the violence that even happens where a buyer attacks the victim. There's not a lot of conversation around that. And I'm grateful that I don't have some of the horror stories that some of the other victims that were out there around that same time has. I mean, I even know one of the young ladies at the time, she lost her life out there.
Mm.
And so just those were the biggest challenges. How do I remain safe?
Mm-hmm.
Not just safe in my body, but how do I remain safe from the police? How do you remain safe from STDs? How do you remain safe from getting robbed? How do you remain safe from getting kidnapped? There's so the list
Wow.
is endless. It's
Wow.
endless. Yeah.
Wow.
And then you're also facing your own shame in the midst of it,
Mm.
because it's like, where do I go? Where do
Mm.
I go? Who can I turn to? Can I even ask for help? Or
Mm-hmm.
how would I be viewed if I ask for help? What do I tell them if I
Mm-hmm.
ask for help? I had an instance once, and I was in New Jersey, and I asked a police officer for help, and he didn't want to be bothered. He was just like, he didn't care whether or not I was safe. He just, I think for him, he wasn't sure of my age. And when you're dealing with underage youth, there's a stack of paperwork this thick to get done. He saw it as, I think in his mind, just looking back, is like, oh, you just got in a fight with your boyfriend, whatever. It's fine,
Mm. Mm.
you
Mm.
know.
Mm.
And all I asked for was,
Mm.
can you help me get into this hotel and get my things?
Mm.
Not even that.
Didn't want to be bothered.
Did
Didn't
not
want
want
to
to
be
be
bothered.
bothered.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about what you were saying earlier, that you not quite sure at what point was the pivot? Can you talk about what it looked like? Because I imagine that I know what I think in my mind,
Hmm.
but I'm sure it goes well beyond this. But can you just talk a little bit about what it looked like from going from, oh, this is my boyfriend, this is my boo, to he's having me out here with other guys, girls, whatever the case,
Hmm.
for money? Was
Hmm.
that a, you're going to do this and you're going to like it and I don't want to hear nothing about it? Or was it, oh, hey, I want to try some things. Do you love me? You want to try this with me? Like, how did it,
Oh
I
no,
imagine there's
there
a
was
plethora
no
of ways
with
it can
me.
happen.
There was no with me.
Mm.
It was, this is what's happening, and there's no additional conversation. There's no, I don't care about the tears. I don't care about you not wanting to do it. I don't care. It doesn't matter. This is what's happening.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
And then how, at the ages we are today, like I have a 26-year-old, not 22-year-old. And the things that I thought I knew at those ages,
Yeah.
right? We think we know it all I think at every stage of life, but I can't even
Hmm.
imagine what was going through your mind at that young of age, and how you had to basically encapsulate your own psyche to get through that moment by
Oh,
moment, hour by hour, day by
absolutely.
day.
Absolutely. What I have learned is that I disassociate. And I think that's what kept me protected during that time.
Okay.
Because when in the act, I would leave my body.
Okay.
I could literally, and oftentimes you hear that, in regards to like sexual abuse as well. It's like you leave your body
Hmm.
so that, it's a defense mechanism. And I often compartmentalize as well.
Hmm.
And that's the only way I made it through. That's the only way. And I tell people, I've never done drugs. I've never had, I never suffered from some of the common side effects of being in the life.
Okay.
And I can truly say I feel like God protected me by that skill of disassociation, which
Okay.
unfortunately I'm pretty sure I learned it from a dysfunctional household.
Which is one
So
of those things, like the battle scars come from many
mhm,
places sometimes, not just one
absolutely,
particular battle. Absolutely.
absolutely.
So, gosh, gosh, I could talk to you for hours. When you are in a place,
Mhm.
Katrina at 18, 19, 20 years old, are in a place, it might be a place you've never seen before, a place you've never been, new person, a person you've seen before. Are there expectations of you from your trafficker on how to act around the, using your term, buyer?
Hmm. So he connected me with, and there's a lot of terms in the subculture.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so, like, for instance, the wife-in-law would be another young girl that he also has. And then they would also use the term sister-in-law, where two pimps are really good friends with one another. So because they're really good friends, you then get to, I guess, fellowship with their girls.
Oh,
And when, and it was an older, not that much older, but an older quote unquote sister-in-law who taught me everything. So he entrusted her, and she showed me how to do everything from the beginning to the end of transaction, at all the things, how to stay safe. Um, and it's funny, I was just telling someone the other day that she and I ran into each other maybe about 15 years ago.
mm,
And we're both on the other side of this now. And I always would wonder about her. And I was just grateful to see that she was doing well. And, life had shifted for her as it had for me. And, to know that, like, we withstood that, we got through that, time
mm.
period in our lives, together, and we survived and we made it, and we're doing so well with our lives now. But I learned everything that I needed to know from other girls that were already trapped in the
Right,
midst of it.
right.
Mhm.
Okay. How long were you in that world?
That's a really hard ask,
Mm,
because I often tell people, just like a domestic violence victim, they say you leave 7 times before you're done. And the same thing happens in sex trafficking when you are getting away from a pimp.
okay.
And I had left on several occasions. All in all, almost 2 years. But there was a period of going back and forth. There was a period of, I jumped on a Greyhound bus, got back to Atlanta, and before I knew it, he was right back there. And keep in mind, he knew everything that he needed to know about me. So he knew where my mother lived.
He knew where to look
He
for you.
knew how to find me. Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Um, and it took time. It wasn't just that one and done. It took
Okay.
time. It took strategy. It took a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Was your mother aware of what was going on when you made it back to her?
No.
She
I
had
know
no
that
idea.
she had suspected some things. I know that she had put in a missing persons report.
Okay.
Um, but I don't know how much she actually knew,
Okay.
you know.
Okay.
Until this day, we've not had that in-depth conversation. I think
Okay.
once we reconnected, um, she was just glad I was safe,
Mm,
you
okay.
know.
Hmm. My goodness, I can't imagine. So, what was the turning point? What allowed you to break free from your trafficker? Like, how did it happen?
It became, and this is something I often tell people when I'm training those who training nonprofits and those who do direct services,
Okay.
is, for me, it was the fear of staying and complying became greater than the fear of leaving,
Oh.
because all of this is smoke and mirrors with traffickers. It's all mind games.
Hmm.
And as long as you're in fear, they have control.
Hmm.
And it switched for me. All of a sudden it became a, no matter what, I'm out of here. No matter how, like, I've got to go. And by that time I had my son, who's now 26, and he was 5 or 6 months old. And I knew that I knew it wasn't going to be easy to leave, because there was also the threat of, you can go, but he not going.
Okay. So your son is the son of the trafficker.
Yes, that is
This man.
correct.
Okay. Okay.
And, just all kinds of threats, up and down, in and out.
Mm.
And it, and here's the thing, I knew I was ready. And I knew I was prepared. I just didn't know what night it was going to be. And he had four other young ladies at that time. But I was like the main girl. And, again, going back to like the different terms and vocabulary, they call that the bottom. And the other girls were very upset and jealous that I wasn't required to work as much as them. And that began to cause a problem. Keep in mind, I just had a baby.
Between you and the girls, the other
Yes,
girls. Oh wow.
yes.
Okay.
So there was and so now he has to be enforcement, you know, because I should be out there working just as much as the next one. Why wouldn't I be working just as much as the next one? And I had already stated and said out loud that I was done, you know. Um, he said I wasn't done, but I said I was done. And it was just like, it was kind of like, it was like a ticking time bomb. I knew it had to happen. I knew when it happened, it was going to be explosive. Um, he knew that I was that I was at that turning point. So he stayed very present and very near.
Hmm.
Because I think by that time he knew if I turned my head too long, she would be gone. If he did leave me, he would take the son with him. So, he knew how to keep me trapped.
Kind of as collateral.
Yeah,
He was using his
absolutely.
own child as collateral,
A hundred
basically.
percent. 100%. And
Whew.
but one night I was just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to work. I'm done. And I had my son in my arms. I had a few pieces of clothing in my arms as well. And I literally had to fight him to get out that door. Literally. And I don't even know, because this guy's way stronger than me. I don't even know. It had to have been the grace of God that I was able to get away from him and get out that door.
Mm, mm, mm,
And
mm.
I didn't turn back that last time.
Thank you,
Granted,
God.
right, he would sit outside of my mother's door.
In Atlanta.
Yes, in Atlanta, he would follow me to work, sit outside from my job. I immediately enrolled in college. He knew where I was, like, he just knew. And he would show up and he would follow me. And that happened for a while, and then it finally subsided. It finally, like, stopped, thank goodness. And probably because it was taking way too much of his time to get at me rather than work the girls that he had.
Hmm. And to
So,
make sure that I understand correctly, these
mhm.
girls are still in New York.
No,
Well,
no,
at the
no.
time they were. This was.
Everybody's in Atlanta.
Oh,
He
at
didn't
this
just
point, you're back in Atlanta.
Yes, he did
Got
not
you.
he
Okay,
did not transition alone. He
I
Everybody's
see.
coming. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So
Hmm.
he bought the clan with him basically
Yeah.
to follow you and
Hmm.
basically stalk you. And was
Pretty
that a
much.
fear tactic?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It turned into, it came from the demands of coming back to the begging of coming back to the I love you come back to the if you don't come back. I mean, I heard it all.
I'm hearing the five stages of grief in my head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay. So was police involved at this point? Hey, there's
No,
a guy standing outside my
no,
house, so you never involved
no.
the police at this
Never
point.
involve the police because number one, in our community, we don't trust the police.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately.
especially in the late 90s, early 2000s,
Yes.
that wasn't the first person you wanted to call because then that meant I had to spill all the other information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I'm carrying tons of shame about what I've experienced.
Hmm.
And at that time, being a victim of sex trafficking wasn't looked in a way that it's looked at now. So for me, I'm like, if we just stay quiet enough and ignore long enough, he'll leave us alone. And that's what happened.
That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
So, as far as you know, today,
hmm
2024, he's still
hmm
roaming the street, probably doing the same thing.
Well, karma has a way of getting to people.
Oh,
So he did become addicted to drugs, and he struggled with that for quite some time. I don't know his current status. The last I heard, he's in one of the Carolinas. Um, and as my son got older, he was asking about his father, and I made the connection. I made
mm,
the connection. And what's really interesting about making that connection is they went to spend time together. And in spending time together, he may have had my son all of 15 minutes before getting pulled over by the police. He was pulled over by the police. Unbeknownst to me, when I was 9 months pregnant, he beat the living daylights out of me. So much so the neighbors called the police. This was in Cobb County. And I was pregnant at the time, and there's blood on the wall. I mean, it was a mess. But again, I loved him. I didn't press charges. But because of my age and because of the severity of the incident, the state took over the case.
and because you were pregnant.
Yes, that's another
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, and obviously unbeknownst to him, there was a warrant for his arrest.
For that incident where you didn't
10,
actually press charges, but the state did.
10 years later, he has our child. And not even 15 minutes on 285 or 75, he was on in Atlanta, gets pulled over. And he goes to prison for almost 2 years at that time, like 18 months, I believe.
Hmm.
So again, karma has a way of,
Wow.
yeah.
So let me ask you, mother to mother,
hmm
what motivated you to say, yes, I'm going to let you have some time with your son, knowing the type of things that he was into?
He no longer had power over me. And one thing that was I guess beautiful and tragic about our interaction is that I also got to know him very well.
Mm,
And so he had absolutely no power over me. I knew that, he was in recovery at the time that we connected. There are people and he comes from a very good home, college educated family, upper middle class upbringing. And he was the only child that kind of, was
veered off.
the wayward child, I guess. So, I never held that against his family.
Okay.
And I always stayed in contact with his uncle because, strangely enough, his uncle knew a cousin of mine years before we even made contact. It was just a very strange connection.
Gotcha.
And he's still a great man. And we always stayed in contact.
Okay.
So he would periodically get updates on, what was going on with him. But, I always said, regardless of what occurred, that's still his side, my son's side of the family. And I wanted him to get to know them. I wanted him to connect with them. But then there came a time, and I think every mother with a boy can kind of relate to this. There comes a time when your son speaks to you and you hear that man and not that little boy you raised. And that's what that was. And I was like, you know what? Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And he made that connection. And he ultimately decided that he didn't want a relationship with him.
Your son decided he didn't want the relationship.
Absolutely.
He got the answers to his questions, basically.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Because
I'm going to tell you.
I never wanted it to be, you kept me away from my father.
Exactly. Hmm.
And he was old enough to, advocate for himself. Um,
How old was he at the time?
he was 10 or 11 at the time
Okay. Gotcha.
and still pretty young. And to this day, he's still wise beyond years. And, I think he just wanted those answers.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to be of question.
Okay.
And, to this day, he still doesn't communicate with him.
Hmm. How much of
Yeah.
your story does your son know?
Oh, they all know everything.
Okay, so he knows all
They,
of these stories.
oh,
Nothing
absolutely.
that we're talking
Absolutely.
about would be new to them, to your
Absolutely
children.
not. Absolutely not. And one thing that I am a firm believer in generational curses.
Yes, ma'am.
And I do feel that one way to prevent, one way to give our children the tools that they need is
Hmm.
to share those experiences. They need to know we're not perfect. They need to know that we've struggled with the same thoughts and the same things that they struggle with as well.
Hmm.
And I've always, I've shared age appropriate things,
Of
and as
course.
they got older, I would share more and more. But they know, they
Yeah.
know, and I think it has been instrumental in our bond. I think it's been instrumental in even how they see life.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. You really just hit the nail on the head. You can teach a child by saying, do this, do
Mm-hmm.
that, don't do
Mm-hmm.
this. And you can say, well, I'm older, so I've been through more things. But they really
Yeah,
don't understand that until you share with them, this is what I've been through. I'm not just
absolutely,
talking. I'm not saying something
absolutely.
that I heard about. That I've
Mm-hmm.
walked this.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's always, I have three boys. I'm a mom of
Mm-hmm.
three boys, and their personalities are all very different, but at the same time, all very the same in the sense of, like you, I can have age appropriate conversations with my
Mm-hmm.
boys, at 26, 22, and 9, and get the same point across, just conveyed
Absolutely,
differently to each one of them.
absolutely.
But like you said, being a mother of boys, you learn that there's a turning point in their lives where you realize it's time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
It's time.
absolutely. 100%.
I have Sean Wins who just chimed in with a comment saying the strength of a mother and a woman, that's what gets it done. And that's so true. That's so true.
Yes, yes.
Wow, wow. So talk to me about your support system. Like who were your or what were your biggest sources of support as you were breaking free? We're going to just call it what it is, breaking free of your trafficker.
Absolutely. So, several things along the way. And I always say that, we as humans are responsible for planting seeds. We're not responsible for changing people's lives. It's not on us, it's on them. And several seeds were planted along the way while I was still in my life. One of them was I had been arrested quite a few times. And for whatever reason, I kept appearing before the same judge. And he was pretty tired of seeing me. And so he said, either you go into Rikers,
Ooh.
right? Or you can go connect with this young lady in the back of the room. We have incarceration alternative program.
Hmm.
And obviously I chose door number 2.
Hello.
And
Mm.
she was instrumental in teaching me that I was a victim and that I was being trafficked. Because if you ask me, that's my man. That's my man. And and we are down together and whatever, we ride or die. That is my man.
Wow.
You couldn't tell me anything
Even
different.
that deep in
Oh,
with the different
absolutely.
times of abuse, just all the.
Absolutely. Even with the multiple women, like all of it. That is my man.
And is that part of, because somebody who's hearing about this that
Hmm.
doesn't have the, I don't know what way to put it, I'll just say emotional intelligence to
Hmm.
like really empathize with your story, would probably think, oh, she was dumb. What you mean? He was doing all this to you and you did the right, because they ain't never been there, done that, they ain't never
Hmm.
experienced it. So my question to you with that is that something that is metaphorically beat into you? Oh,
Oh,
that's my
absolutely.
man. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because, you know, you take the blame of everything. He beat me because I did something wrong, because
Okay.
I was out of line. You know,
Mhm.
he treated me like this because I didn't reach my quota.
Mhm.
You know, victims carry the weight of
Okay.
what that person is doing to them. It's gaslighting up, down, and inside out.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, and it's, and I've trained thousands and thousands of people, and the most common question that I get is, well, why don't you just leave? It's not like he's with you 24/7, you know. Why don't you just leave? And my response to that is, why don't you lose those 30 pounds you've been struggling with for the past 5 years? Why don't
Right.
you stop smoking those cigarettes that you hate?
Why don't you just stop what your thing is? Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And because the reality is that mental shift that is required for that change to occur. Imagine a teenager having to do that same thing. Is where that light has to, it has to just change. Something has to be different, where you just kind of wake up and just say, oh, enough of this.
Hmm.
No more. And that usually satisfies that question, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because we all have things that we struggle with, whether it be unhealthy, relationships, whether it be cigarette smoking, whether it be drinking, whatever it is, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I always tell people we all have a story.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a story,
Right.
and that's, that's just that.
But you make a very good point, and I want to make sure that we really drive it home for the
Mhm.
listeners and the watchers of this. I don't want to make this sound like I'm minimizing it, but I'm trying to illustrate a point by
Mhm.
giving a very simple and even stupid example.
Yes.
I have a love affair with gummy bears, with Haribo gummy bears
So does my 5-year-old.
that just it just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be, right?
Uh-huh.
And the bottom line is something as simple as some freaking a gummy bear habit. I can't just be like, you know what, I'm done with gummy bears, no more.
Right.
Because I know I shouldn't be eating a whole 3-pound pack of gummy bears in 2 sittings. No
Yes.
more. If I can't just walk away from some freaking gummy bears, what
Hmm.
makes a person think it's a good way to drive the point home, like you're saying, is
Absolutely.
that what makes you think that someone who's being abused in any form or fashion can
Hmm.
just walk away?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I really like how you presented that, because that's how I was thinking in my head as you were saying. That's the question that is posed to you very often. Like, okay, well, just like you said, just lose that 30 pounds real quick. Then what's the problem?
Right.
Stop
Exactly.
overeating. Whatever.
Exactly.
stop
Exactly.
stop making bad money choices. Stop.
That part. Right.
Wow. So you had that particular. You used that. Uh, Putting up air quotes out by saying I'm gonna choose door number two and go with
Hmm.
homegirl who's gonna put me through some stuff. And she
Absolutely.
was that source for you that kind of brought to light what was actually happening, not what you were
Absolutely.
romanticizing in your head.
And please believe I didn't believe it. I was just
So it
like,
took a minute. It wasn't like she said it
absolutely.
and then boom, you got it. Okay. Okay.
And that's why I say we're only here to plant seeds. I'm
Yeah.
not here to convince anyone of anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's God's work. That's not on me. I'm
Facts.
just,
Facts.
and that's, because keep in mind, I would have to go to her program and I had to be back out as soon as the sun went down. So life didn't change because of that interaction, but it started something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one was, I was, so I would normally wake up around 4 o'clock because again, you're working all night. Wake up 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when Oprah used to come on. And at that time, Ayanna Van Zant was on the show often. And this particular episode, I woke up and there was a house on Oprah's stage. There was this house, and Ayanna Van Zant was talking about like the stages of self awareness and how you start in the basement and you don't know what the problem is, nor do you know how to fix it. And then you go to the next floor, and it's like, now you know what the problem is, but you don't know how to fix it. And then you go to the next floor, and she goes through these stages of healing. And this was at the time the book In the Meantime came out, and she was promoting it on
Mm-hmm.
Oprah. that was another seed for me. That was another like wake up, you
Mm,
know. And again, I watched it. I got in the shower. I got dressed, and I still had to go to work, you
mm,
know. And but those were the two main factors that really started a fire. And I always tell people, when you experience trauma, and this is something, and I've done direct services with young girls who've been trafficked, and I would always tell them that, we're all born with this flame, this light within us. And depending upon our environmental conditions, depending upon trauma, whatever that may be, that light is either fed or it's dimmed, but it never goes out.
mm,
And because it never goes out, you always got tomorrow. You always have a chance. There's always another day. And those instances begin to just feed that fire. Something within me just began to evolve and begin to change. And it was absolutely my faith as well, because I was a preacher's daughter. So, I was in church Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday when I was much younger.
mm,
So that also served as a foundation. But, again, I had religious trauma.
mm.
And keep in mind, I'm just learning this thing about religious trauma. But at
Mhm.
that time, I didn't know what it was. But I
Okay.
knew that I wasn't drawn by religion, but I was always drawn by spirituality.
Okay.
So I
Very
started to
different.
right. And I started to kind of dig into that.
Okay.
And, over time, I've been able to make the bridge between the two. But, that was a foundation for me. So that was absolutely a support. And when I left the life, I lived in the self-help section of Barnes and Noble. I have read all the books inside and out. And I also have known my entire life that I wanted to be a mom. That's one thing
Mm,
I've always known for sure. Even when I questioned my career paths and all of that, I always knew I was going to be a mother, and I always wanted to be a great mother. So I knew that I wanted to do things differently. My kids will tell you, I can be overly affectionate. I'm all up in the business. I'm there. And that's something that I also recognize generational curses. So I, even at that age, I would reflect on what I wanted to do different as a mom, what I wanted to evolve on as a mother. And, it's like, for all that I went through, that self-help section in Barnes and
my
Noble was
gosh.
like everything for me, everything. And I started there. Those were my support systems.
Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
know, um, and I did eventually buy the book in the meantime.
Hmm. I know it all too
and
well. I know that book
and
very well.
and yeah, and I kind of, and I fell in love with everything that Iyanla Vanzant had written at that time, and just really, I became very curious.
Okay. Okay.
That would probably be like the curiosity of self-love, the curiosity of letting go. Just, I became so curious about myself, about life. Um, yeah, not so much my traumas in the beginning. I will say again, compartmentalized it and went on with my life.
But
you
even
know.
still, Katrina, how many people who have been victims never got to a point where they said they realized things for themselves, like, I want
Hmm.
to be a great mom, I want to try some new things, I want to learn this vocation, blah blah blah, as opposed to they're out the life and okay, good, that's all they wanted, I just need to get out of there,
Right,
and their
right.
lives didn't really take a path of quote unquote triumph the way we might define it, but their
Hmm.
triumph was that they just got out, but they
I
never,
agree.
you
I
know what
agree
I mean?
100%, because and again, I've because it what it looks like is that it feels more like a lateral move. So you're still
Yeah.
cycling through some of your own lessons in life. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I may not be with this pimp over here, but now I'm with the drug dealer. Or now I'm doing this. Or now it's that.
The problem
And
has just been moved.
Yes,
basically.
absolutely. Absolutely. Mhm.
So the fact that you were, even though at that particular moment you weren't
Mhm.
necessarily dealing with the trauma, you still had, there was still a spark that was in you, which
Mhm.
probably, just listening to you talk, which was probably the thing that got you through in the first place. That spark in you knew that you had a greater purpose, whatever that was, and you were on the search to find what that purpose was.
Absolutely. And I had a praying mother. I will say that.
Woo! Listen, we're about to go to church. Don't stop nothing.
Listen, like,
The
yes.
power of a praying mama.
Mhm.
I'm telling you. Yeah. No, that is just, that's so amazing to me, because like I said, how many people, they just settled for the good enough.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
and didn't pursue anything further.
Absolutely.
I just can't imagine. So you talked a little bit about how, like, you know, your faith and your spirituality
Mhm.
helped you reclaim yourself, reclaim you, and allowed you to evolve, not just reclaim where you were at the time, but also evolve from there.
Mhm.
What about therapy? Talk about that a little bit, because I'm sure there's people out there that
Right.
might be at a stage or at a point where they're like, no, still that shameful point in their life. And they're
Absolutely.
like, I don't want to tell anybody or talk about it or relive it.
What's unfortunate, no matter what that trauma is, if you don't talk about it, if you don't face it, and whatever facing it looks like for you, whether it's journaling, whether it's therapy, whatever that facing it looks like for you, it has a way of creeping up into your present life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whether you're like the overprotective mom because of sexual abuse that you encountered as a child, whether it looks like I can't even have a long-term relationship because I can't it shows up. And I only discovered I've been doing therapy on and off for a while. But in the beginning, I did not. Because keep in mind, early 2000s, all the therapists and psychiatrists I knew did not look like me.
Yeah, and
And
that makes a difference.
one thing I knew for certain is that I could not discuss my experiences and my struggles with someone who did not look like me.
Ooh, mm.
Because and there's a lot to be said about
Mm.
the Black experience.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't go learn that in an African American study class. It's not gonna happen.
For a couple credits. Mm-mm,
Yes, it's
mm-mm,
not going to
mm-mm.
happen.
And
And
and at some point you'll feel like, and I've heard people say this before, you feel like you have to spend more time teaching so that they
educating.
can understand before you can
Yes,
start working on you in the first place. And by that time you're so exhausted mentally that you never
exactly.
get to the work for you.
Keep in mind
So,
you're paying for it.
and you're paying for it the whole time. That part, let's not forget that part.
Yes. Yes.
No,
No.
what you're saying makes complete sense, and I can totally understand why you say that. At least,
And
like you said, back then, especially.
yes. And I became a
Mhm.
gym rat. I think that was my therapy for
Mm,
decades. I was a gym rat. And what I didn't know until
mm,
15 years after my experience, there is a book, The Body Keeps the Count, I
mhm.
believe is the title. And it talks about how particularly sexual trauma is kept in the body. Movement is what releases that trauma and has been scientifically proven that it is kept in the body. It's in your muscles. It's in you, and you've got to get it out. And it's kind of, looking back, I'm like, I instinctively knew
Mhm.
that I had to get it out. And when I tell you I was in that gym all the time, I felt better. My mind was clear. And I mean, it's all the benefits that the gym gives everyone. But it was deeper for me
Mhm.
because of what I experienced.
Almost like what
So,
people describe when they're like, I've been craving eating ice. Your body's craving ice because your iron is low, or
your
I've
iron
been
is low. Yes.
craving chocolate.
Right.
Different things. Like your
Right.
body was
Right.
craving that release, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. Wow.
Absolutely.
I
Mhm.
I want to keep this conversation going, and we're going to keep this conversation going, but we're going to break for a
Mhm.
quick commercial. You all stay tuned because Katrina rose above, and we're going to talk about how she rose above. And we're going to be right back with Miss Katrina Massey in just a moment. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just about a minute.
You ever wish you had more hands to do more stuff? Hello again. Rashid Hamid here from Extra Hands Virtual Assistants. And I've got good news.
Drum roll, please.
We've been invited back to be regular guests on your favorite podcast, Life Uncensored, navigating adulthood one episode at a time, featuring our special segment, B2B with Extra Hands, where we focus on business-to-business relationships, growing your business, and basically getting unstuck. Take it from me, productivity coach and founder of Extra Hands Virtual Assistants.
Count me in.
Our first episode is scheduled to be shot and released on December the 11th. Really excited to have you guys check it out. It's going to be an amazing thing, partnering with Amanda, partnering with Extra Hands. It was a match made in heaven, felt supernatural, and very excited to be a part of this team. You don't want to miss this.
Thank you guys for holding on. We are back. I'm going to bring Miss Katrina back to the stage in just a moment, but just a few quick things for you all. I've talked about this before. If you have an idea for a show topic or you would like to be a guest, please visit our website, life-uncensored.com, and hit the button so that you can set up a quick meet and greet with me and we can talk through those topics. You can also go to the website just to say, hey, like the show. This was a great episode, XYZ. Also, if you'd like to promote or advertise a product or service that you have, you're a business owner, an author, anything like that, you have a product or service that you'd like to advertise, we do that as well. Again, go to the website, life-uncensored.com, click the button. It'll tell you exactly what to do, and we'll get that going for you. All right. We're going to continue our conversation with Miss Katrina Massey. Thanks for holding on for me there for that commercial break, Katrina. This has been a really good conversation, and I appreciate your transparency. I just want to say, from an outsider looking in, who has absolutely no idea and will not even pretend to act like I know what you've been through or know how you feel and or felt. I just, through this screen, I just feel from you an enormous amount of peace. You're speaking your truth. It doesn't feel like, and I hope I'm not wrong in saying this, but it doesn't seem or feel like you are still holding on to that trauma. And that just gives me joy because that means that there's other people out there can follow the same path that you followed, right? That it's not,
Absolutely.
this doesn't have to be a story that is the anomaly, so to speak. So I'm really, really glad about that for you. I'm going to talk a little bit, let's pivot a little bit and talk about your transition into the career world. You restaurateur, business owner, real estate broker. How? Talk to us about that transition. How?
So I've known I wanted to do real estate for most of my life.
Oh,
I was that kid that would love to go to Home Depot with my dad. I love the smell of wood, the lumber section, and I just and on like our Sundays between services, because we was in church all day Sunday, we would go walk through new developments, and just like it fascinated me. And you know, when I left the life, I just real estate just never was never not in the forefront of my mind.
mm.
And what made it even more, I guess, appealing is that there was this infomercial that used to come on, Carlton Sheets, no money down program. I bought it. I bought it. And And then, it's like all about using other people's monies and assumable mortgages. And I'm like, it totally went over my head. So I was like, you know what? I got to go to real estate school. I need to get my real estate license to figure this out. The end game for me has always been development.
Okay.
Still not there yet, but we're getting there.
Okay.
And what that has evolved to at this point is development for market rate tenants, as well as creating safe spaces and transitional homes for victims of sex trafficking.
I love it.
A place where they can start all over. And so I got my real estate license. And in Atlanta at that time, real estate agents look very white and nothing like me. So I would go brokerage after brokerage. I'm interviewing. I'm just wanting somebody to give me an opportunity. And on several occasions, they would ask, do you have 6 months of living expenses put aside? No, I do not. Now, I understand why they asked me that. But then I was heartbroken. I'm like, I just need a chance, And so I went back to the restaurant industry, serving tables and trying to figure out this real estate thing. That turned into, doing property management. I became property manager of a 282 unit in Atlanta. So I just started doing things that kind of built the steps to the next thing.
Okay.
Even when it came to restaurants, I'm serving tables, and that turned into, oh, you're great. Do you want to train? Okay, great. I'm training. Oh, this person can't do inventory. You want to do inventory? Oh, okay. Do you mind redoing the training manuals? Oh, okay. You want to cover a shift. And then that transitioned from server to management, and then eventually reaching that place and point of becoming a general manager. And not just becoming a GM, but taking, and it was a part of a very large restaurant group. At its height, they had 16 restaurants around the city, and these are very well-known restaurants. If anybody in here from Atlanta, they know the One Midtown Kitchens, the Two Urban Licks, the Room at 12, both of the restaurants, and the 12 hotels. So I was the manager of the restaurant and the 12 hotels. And I was able to take this restaurant that was the worst performing in that group. And throughout that time, I made it the #1 restaurant in that group, as well as the highest profit that any of the restaurants had ever had.
Wow.
And I did that without a college education. I just figured it out. I worked very long hours. I showed up. And, I tell people all the time, it's not always about the credentials. It's how you show up. There's a way to get there. There's a way to get there.
Absolutely.
Keep in mind, by that time, I had 5 children and newly divorced. And just like figuring all of this out and knowing that, at one point I thought I wanted to leave the hospitality industry. And, a friend of mine, he looked at me one day and he was like, use what you've done for most of your life to provide the next opportunity for yourself.
That part.
And that made me do restaurants different. That made me show up different, which did open those doors, which did give me those opportunities. And then I also started doing direct services. I never wanted to just talk about my experience. I just, again, compartmentalized that and carried on with life, carried on with my career. And that same person that I met in the back of that courtroom, she and I would keep in touch with each other. And she called me and she's like, hey, there's a $1.5 million grant coming to the mayor's office that is specifically for sex trafficking. They are mandated to have a nonprofit organization under the mayor's office that provides direct services for victims. And she was like, I think it would be great. And she would always say that. She would always think, oh my God, you should be doing this work. And I'm just like, I don't need to talk to anybody about this. I'm good. I am great. She kept pushing, and I did it. And that experience was so healing for me. Because again, you can't quite compartmentalize or tuck away what the traumas, because it shows up. So I began those experiences where I'm doing direct services. I'm working in the juvenile court systems. I'm at the juvenile facilities. I'm in these children's homes. I'm working with the parents. I'm in the schools. I'm doing all of this while still working full time as a general manager of a restaurant. Because keep in mind, I was divorced, and it was a bit of a struggle in the
Mm,
beginning.
mm.
So I was getting a check from everywhere, wherever I can get it. I was like, okay, if that's an opportunity, okay, great. And then I
Mm.
discovered my voice, and in discovering my voice, that turned into public speaking opportunities. And that's when I started doing the legislative work. That's when I started speaking publicly. That's when I started doing the trainings. And these two things were happening simultaneously.
Wow.
And that turned into an opportunity for that same young woman to say, hey, I've been doing this for over 20 years. It's time for me to retire. Do you want to come and be the executive director of my organization? So
I know you a lie.
I am so serious. This is Glisten. And what's beautiful,
Mm.
again, did not have a degree. But what I learned about running businesses and growing businesses, like numbers don't lie,
Numbers do not
you
lie.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So they knew I had the ability to do it because not only was I running some of the most successful restaurants in the city, I also had the highest retention rate.
Mm-hmm.
So my employees weren't leaving me,
Mm-hmm. And
and they were
listen,
making
let's
good
not
money.
let's not gloss over that one simple thing that you just said. The highest successful restaurants run by you in the city of Atlanta, not
Exactly.
just any old city,
Right,
of
right.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
I don't want to gloss over that. I want that to like really resonate with people, what you're saying here.
Absolutely. I was
Mm,
managing $6.5 million of somebody else's money, and I
mm,
was growing it.
mm.
And so what I was able to do there, plus what I was doing in the direct services and working with victims of sex trafficking, and now I'm speaking publicly, and I'm speaking on a national level at that point, that created enough momentum for me to be offered this executive director position. And that's what moved me back to New York City.
Got you.
So that's how I ended up back here because I've always wanted to move back. I've always wanted, I knew that this city had so much more to offer me than what I had previously experienced.
Mm, mm.
So I got back here, my dream job, making more money than I've ever made. I brought me and my 5 kids up here. And one thing I always promised my children, I've always said to them, if my work required me to be absent so much that you now require the services that I'm offering to the people
Mm.
that I'm working with, I'm done.
That's it.
That's it. Because
Cold
you
turkey.
never
That's
come in front
it.
of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were becoming teenagers in middle school and high school. And I made the decision to pull back. I still do this work. I do misdirect services, but I'm still in DC. I'm still doing the policy work. I'm still speaking nationally, and I'm still consulting. But real estate gave me the freedom of time that
Yeah.
I
Okay.
needed.
Okay.
So I got my
Mm,
license in New York, and I started doing real estate here. I've been doing it now full time for 7 years,
mm.
and it has given me the freedom to be a mom. It has given me an opportunity to do something that doesn't have a ceiling. Because one thing I knew, as great of a position as it was, nonprofits, you're not getting a raise every couple of years. You're not getting a
Facts.
raise every year.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew my kids were going to college soon, and I wanted to be able to provide support for them during those
Yeah.
transitional moments.
Yeah.
And as great as my income was, did it serve the next steps of my life?
Right. Right.
And with real estate, it's all on me. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Mm-hmm.
eat what you kill in
Yeah.
this industry.
Very literally. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's given me, it was just another pivot for me where it's like, okay, so now I'm doing real estate. And that's how that journey happened. And it's been an amazing journey.
Can I just stop and slow clap for the Black girl magic on this one? Okay, because I, I'm listening to you, I'm watching you. Like I said, I feel this peace coming off of you. How many people do we walk past every day, going to the grocery store, take the kids to school, going on a walk around the neighborhood that have been through this,
Hmm.
but you don't see the scars on them? I
Absolutely.
wouldn't know bumping into you at the grocery store saying, "Hey, where did you get that bread from?" I wouldn't know that you've been through this.
I thank God I don't look like what I've been through.
And that right there speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to your story, and the thing that just keeps coming back to my mind, I'm going to just go ahead and say it out loud, is God's been chasing after me. Katrina, God was chasing after you this
Yeah.
whole time. This whole
Absolutely.
down, even with the real estate stuff, you couldn't get in your foot in the door and blah 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 blah.
Right.
God was chasing after you, girlfriend.
Hmm.
I just, this is truly a triumph story. And, not to be cliche about it, but how many times you hear people say, if I can get through it, then you can get through it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? This is a true
Absolutely.
triumph story. It really, really is.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you, as we start to wind down on the episode, what advice would you give someone who might be still in, just
Hmm.
walked into a very similar situation, someone who's feeling hopeless about it, feeling stuck? What advice would you give?
Never forget who you are.
Mm,
Remember who you were before the trauma.
mm,
When I would work with girls, and I mentioned this briefly before, but talking about that flame of hope, know that it's still there. It's not going anywhere. It's going to always be there. And I used to never understood what it meant to tap in. You
mm,
know, you have to
mm.
tap into that inner source. You have to go
Wow.
back to when it still felt pure.
Mhm.
And when I would work with the young ladies and those that were like closer to like high school graduating age, because most of my girls are 14, 15 years old. And, I'll occasionally have some that were closer to high school graduating age and just trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their life. And we would always revert back to before the trauma. What did you want to be when you was 5 years old? What did you want to be when you were 6? And we would start there. And then the flip side of it is because, there are those of us who don't remember a life without trauma.
Mm,
And for that, I always say be free to dream,
mm,
even if it feels impossible.
mm,
See yourself there.
mhm.
You've got to see yourself there. You've got to, and with some of them, I would, because it would still be kind of, they're like, yo, what are you talking about? And then I would tell them, like, what kind of car do you want to drive? They tell me, I'll write that down. They know that. What
Mhm.
neighborhood do you want to live in? Oh, okay. I'll write that down. What is your wardrobe? Because a lot of times they could connect with what that material stuff feels like.
Mhm.
And I would write all this down. And not only would I write that down, I would write out how much this stuff costs.
Mm.
And so from from there, I would say, oh, okay, so you need to make at least $75,000 a year. Now let's look at what careers support that salary.
Mhm.
And I would work backwards with them. And
Yeah,
I
you
always
backtrack
tell,
it. Mhm.
yeah. So, okay, if this is where you want to be, then this is where we need to start.
Yeah.
And I always start with the big dream. Don't be afraid to dream. Don't be afraid to see yourself beyond your circumstances.
Yes.
And it's you don't necessarily always have a mentor within your arm's reach,
True.
but that's why Barnes and Noble exists.
Mhm. Well, listen, that inner
Podcasts,
voice sometimes,
books,
but
yes,
yeah, all
all
those
of these
things.
things.
Mm.
It may look different, and you are not your trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You are not your trauma. You are not you're not your family's curse. You're
Mm-hmm.
not any of that. You're whatever you want to be.
That part. Mm-hmm.
And understand that you have the power to be whatever you want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
it's never too late, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Sometimes people feel like, well, I've done this for so long, I don't know anything else. Until you know something else.
You had to
Just
learn that. You had to learn that thing.
right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Very true.
um, and if they're still in the life and it's like, where do I go from here? How do I take the first step? Um, you know, every city has local resources, and I can't promise you that they're all good because I've come across not several, many organizations that aren't that great. Um, and unfortunately, there are a lot of white saviors wanting to do this work. And unfortunately, 60% of those that are trafficked are people of color. And I tell those women who want to do this work, why don't you focus on demand reduction?
Mm.
Because over 80% of those who purchasing, they look like you.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
They are white men
Mm. Mm. Mm.
buying both boys and girls.
Mm.
You know, um, I kind of got into it with the organization that we were sending girls there, and it was becoming a bit of a problem because I noticed a pattern that every little black girl that walked in that door, they had them on some type of antidepressant within the 2 weeks that they were doing their intake. And we had one very involved, concerned mother who gave me a call, and she's like, they're asking me to sign this paperwork, and I'm not exactly sure why I would be signing it. And she sent it over, and I'm like, do not sign that, because I knew the child very well.
Okay.
And I knew that despite all of the trauma, she did not require medication.
Oh
I'm
wow.
not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but we both knew she's not that case.
Okay.
And
Mm.
so that began to peel back to some of the practices that were in place for little black girls who, were victims of trafficking and then being re-traumatized and re-exploited through organizations,
Just in a different
so
way.
yes,
Mm. Mm.
using their stories when they're literally fresh out of this experience to raise money. Go
Mm.
tell your story. It's so much, so
Wow.
much. So, I wouldn't tell everybody to run to the nearest organization. There are a lot of great organizations that are out there.
Yeah.
But if you just need to get safe, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is that first step.
Okay.
And they can present resources, they can give you a safe place, they can give you a bed to sleep. They can get you out of that situation immediately.
Okay.
Um,
Mm.
Most organizations that they are connected with do have survivors on staff, because one thing that's super important is having someone who knows what it's like to be right there for you in the midst of your crisis is a huge determining factor of whether or not you take that next step or you don't, or you get into a worse situation.
Mm. Okay.
So, it's very important to not be shamed either. It's not your fault. It's
It's
not your
not your
fault.
fault.
That simple.
You are
It is
you are
not.
dropping some serious gems. Remember who you are and know that you are not your trauma
Absolutely.
and it is not your fault.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Yeah.
is your responsibility to do the work.
Mm-hmm. You have to do the work.
Got to do the work.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, you can say that about anything, and it it shouldn't be lost on people that these type of circumstances are included in that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to
Mm-hmm.
do the work. If you want to come out clean on the other side, you have to do the work. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to look pretty.
No.
It's not going
No,
to be fun. None of the stuff.
it's gonna get real messy,
Mhm.
and it's
Absolutely.
okay.
And
It's
that's okay.
okay.
That's part of
Yeah,
the cleanup effort. The mess is
exactly.
part of the cleanup effort. Yeah, yeah. So what would you want your listeners to take away from your story and how you overcame this adversity and building your life beyond this exploitation situation?
Forgive yourself. Forgive
Ooh.
yourself. Um, because I know there were times that I even dealt with survivor guilt because I did make it out. And I know those that were murdered were out there. Um, and being able to just let it go, being okay with just, you've got to forgive yourself. You've got to acknowledge what it is, and you've got to let it go. Um,
Mm.
because if it doesn't, it tends to again multiply and just show up in your life in all these different types of ways where, you know, you're settling for less because you've not forgiven yourself.
You don't feel
You
deserving? Is that
it,
kind of like what you mean? Okay.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Um, and
Mm.
you know, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you did or what happened to you, it's on you. It's on you to let it go. It's on you to forgive yourself and dream. Don't be afraid. Um, and if you don't know where to start, just start with a pen and paper. Journaling is so important to me. And I must admit, I have not been doing it lately. Lord knows I got to get back to it. Because just writing, something's very sacred about holding that pen. And I'm not talking about writing in your notepad on your phone. There's something very sacred about what's happening in your heart and your mind going down on pen and paper.
Mm. Mm.
And even if you don't know what to say, in just thinking about Thanksgiving and being grateful. Another thing I learned from Oprah, I am grateful for,
Mhm.
and writing your three things that you're grateful for every day, starting there. And I remember I would used to, again, talking about holding trauma in your body. I used to, my shoulders, I noticed used to be tight for no reason, or I would lock my legs, and I would feel certain things in my body. And I started to pay a lot of attention to my body, my movement, and just being grateful for my knees, grateful for my limbs. It could be simple things,
Yeah.
but starting there. Thank you for my edges, like,
I
whatever
hear
it may
you.
be,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it may be, just being grateful. And even if you're still in the midst of the storm, there's something sacred about being grateful that just clears it all. And
Mhm.
and and the next steps will be shown to you. The next opportunity, all of that will show up.
Mhm.
You got to have some faith.
Mhm.
And even if you don't have faith, do the work anyway.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you got to do the work first.
Yeah.
Sometimes things have been so bad and so horrible in your life that it's like, how can I have faith?
Mhm.
You know, um, and it's like if you can't find that, just do the work anyway. The faith will come. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it'll come.
I like that. I like that. Um, like you just mentioned, Thanksgiving is just a few short hours away.
Hmm.
What are you most thankful for? As you reflect on all of this, like what are you most
Yes.
thankful for?
You know how Snoop Dogg says, "I want to thank me."
Yes, ma'am. Listen, I ain't mad at him for saying it either.
At all. At all. Because, you know, it starts with us.
Yeah.
I can't give, like, I'm grateful for how my children have grown into these responsible adults, for these kind adults that have done phenomenal work even at their young ages. I'm grateful for that. But I know I put in that work. And I know, like, it's okay to thank yourself and be gracious for you,
Mm-hmm.
because it's you that created the environment that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's you that manifested that,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can then be grateful for what you've manifested. I'm grateful for my mental health. I did the work.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm grateful for the ability to feed my family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm grateful to be able to continue to do this work. I'm grateful that God called me to do this work, because there's a lot of sex trafficking victims and survivors that carry on with life, and they never have the courage, and they never have the calling to even speak a word of what they had gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that the work that I do is sacred,
Yeah.
and it is truly a calling. And I'm grateful to be able to do real estate. I'm grateful to help as many first-time home buyers that I've helped this year who thought they couldn't purchase in New York City. Because
That part right
everybody feel
there.
like, listen, everybody feel like they can't purchase in New York City. And it's like, there's a way. There's a way to
Yeah.
get these things done. You
Yeah.
know, I'm grateful for becoming a part of one of the top brokerages in the city. You know, I've recently changed brokerages, and it's Corcoran, the Corcoran Group. And even in Atlanta at a younger age, I knew who Barbara Corcoran was, and I knew her story. I knew she used to be a server, you know, and that inspired me, you know. And I knew she had like an ex-boyfriend or ex-fiance that told her she wasn't shit. and
Mm.
and here's your $1,000, leave me alone, don't ever call me, and you would never make it in real estate, you
Mm.
know. So that inspired me, and I always knew I wanted to be a part of that brokerage. And this year I'm here, you know.
Wow.
I
Wow.
always know I want to move back to New York City. I'm here. I've always known that I want to be a part of the Corcoran Group. I'm here. And you know, I'm grateful for
Mm.
putting up a vision board and being able to reflect and see that I hit every mark,
Yes.
you know. Um it's there's so much. I could go on and on and on. I'm grateful to be on this podcast, you
Yeah, and
know.
I'm grateful to have you. But no, I think you are a marvelous example of hitting below rock bottom and
Yeah.
still coming out shiny, brand new on the other side at the tip top of the mountain. Like being grateful and showing that gratitude and being able to say, I have these things to be grateful for, regardless
Hmm.
of my past, is
Hmm.
something that is, I don't know, taboo. You know, people
Yeah.
don't think of it that way. You know, nowadays I just feel like so many people are walking around with, oh, this thing went wrong. Oh, I got this going on. Oh, this bad thing, this bad thing. Not enough people. Like, I think I've said this before on this show. I hate it. It like gets under my, I almost take it personally when people say, oh, I'm not a morning person. And I'm like, why not? You woke up. And
Exactly.
very frankly, any day that I wake up, I don't give a rip how bad it is, what's going on, you know, what sucked about that day. I'm glad to have seen it and lived through it to be able to
Absolutely.
wake up tomorrow from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
so
100%.
yeah, so that gratefulness, that gratitude that you are talking about right there, when I tell you it's radiating off of you, and I want the audience to hear and understand that even through going through muck and dirt and having the shame and all the things
Hmm.
that you can still find ways to be grateful, even for having gone through that experience. Because who knows
Hmm.
if having not gone through that experience, would you be where you are right now? Maybe eventually, but
Absolutely.
maybe not right now. You know what I
Who's to
mean?
say? Hmm.
Yeah. Who's to say? Who's to say?
Yeah.
Um, how can our audience stay updated on your upcoming engagements, your events, anything that you got going on? Any websites you want to share, social pages, anything like that?
So I am Katrina Massey, real estate on all platforms.
Love it. Plain and simple.
Yes.
Katrina Massey, all one word.
Yep. Katrina Massey, real estate.
Katrina Massey, real estate,
Real
all one
estate.
word. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
On all platforms.
Okay. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And one last thing before
Mhm.
we part, can you tell our audience one of two things, either your greatest joy
Okay.
or your favorite quote and why it's your favorite quote? I like to end my shows with this with my guests every show. So either your greatest joy or your favorite quote and why it's your favorite quote.
Maya Angelou, it's on my Gmail signature, which is you may not be able to control all the events that happen to you, but you
Mm.
can decide not to be reduced by them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us why. Why that? She has
I
so
mean,
many great
it's
quotes.
yes, we could go on and on about those. Um, because you're not what you've been through. You're not.
There it is.
The essence of who you are is not what happened to you. It's not even what you did,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, it made me think of just even being a mother. And when I would fuss at my children, I would never say you are dot dot dot.
Mm.
Say for instance, like if somebody's being lazy, not doing their chores, I would never say you are lazy. You are
Mm.
being lazy,
Mm-hmm.
because I needed them to always identify with themselves that this is not who you are.
It's a
This is a
particular
behavior.
action at the time.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
I would affirm them with my 5-year-old, we do this whole I am thing every morning. So she recites to me every morning, I am kind, I am smart, I am courageous. And she added on her little last one, and I am super cute. That's her thing right
Yes,
there.
girl.
And and so I so I just as a mother, and even not just with my children, but people I come in contact with.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm in New York City, and I be around here smiling at everybody. They looking at me like, "What is wrong with her?" I've had people like, "You from the South, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yep," you know, because if you stare at me long enough, I'm gonna start talking to you,
Now,
right?
listen.
And because you just never. People always, everybody's going through something, you
Yeah.
know
Yes. Yeah.
and and sometimes that smile can go a long way. Sometimes a simple excuse me just to walk by, it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's bigger than, for me it's bigger than just being from the South and that whole Southern hospitality and manners. it, it, just be kind, just
Just be kind.
get out your head, and we get so wrapped up with life and our problems. And please believe, I got problems, I have challenges, but I choose to not fester in that. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll always have problems. I look forward to having like champagne problems, in the future, those kind of problems where it's like, oh, these are things that only wealthy people have to be concerned with. Is that
Rich
really a
people problems.
problem? Yeah, is that really a problem? Yeah, I
What
look
do you
forward to
mean I
that.
have to take a Lyft instead of an Uber?
Exactly, exactly. Oh, there's no black cars in my area, like. Just like, and it's funny because I have friends with those kind of problems, and I just like, what are you talking about? Like, get over yourself. But
I love
you're
it.
you're not what you're going through. You're just
Mhm.
not. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. We've got Juanita Burnett from Facebook saying, congratulations. And then
Thank
she
you.
says, you are not what you've been through.
I appreciate that.
Katrina, you have been a most gracious and wonderful guest. I could talk to you for hours upon hours, and I just appreciate you sharing your story, being transparent, not being shy, and no longer carrying that shame, showing
Absolutely.
others that may be in your situation that they don't have to carry the shame always
Hmm.
either. So, thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Keep doing
Yes.
the work you've been doing, advocating for, working for, and helping
Hmm.
those who are coming through this behind you. Because I think that's another big part of any trauma that I'll say this for myself. I've always believed that when I go through a really rough situation, God brought me there because he knew I was strong enough to withstand it in order to help the people coming behind me getting ready to go through it.
Absolutely.
So,
100%.
so you keep up that good work.
I will. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to stand by with me for just a moment while I close out the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Katrina Massey.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Whew, that was a heavy hitting conversation. And I really hope that even if we just reached one person, if what was said on tonight's episode resonated with one person, if one life can be changed or made just slightly better with one person, I pray that was done, because that means our jobs were done. And I just want to I can't thank Katrina enough for her willingness to share her story, her triumph, her tragedy turned to triumph. I'm going to leave you guys with a few housekeeping notes. Remember, like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and LinkedIn. Again, you can also catch previous episodes on our website, which is life-uncensored.com. Don't forget the dash, life-uncensored.com. Thank you for our guests and audience who are commenting. Sorry I didn't get to all the comments. Juanita, welcome to the family. You said this was your first time here. Welcome to the family. Thank you for joining tonight for this very important conversation. Our next episode will air on December the 11th, where we're going to be talking to three familiar women, China, Shanae, and Tarina. You all met them back in September, I believe. Black business women doing Black business women things. They're going to be talking with us about end of year things to keep in mind for entrepreneurs. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with my quote for today, which is also from Miss Maya Angelou. So Katrina and I thinking alike there. And that quote is, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." And I think this quote perfectly aligns with Katrina's story, highlighting the courage to rise above her circumstances and to create a life, of meaning. And this can pertain to you in any circumstance that you were in. Your definite definition of success, despite any challenges you face, is what this quote is talking about. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. Miss Maya Angelou. All right, everyone, you have a great night. Have the happiest, safest, funnest, most relaxing Thanksgiving, the tastiest Thanksgiving. Hug somebody, tell them you love them. You don't know when you'll be able to again. Make sure you stay hydrated. Do something kind for someone. You don't know, it might change the world. Until next time, bye, everybody.